The United Nations Secretary General has issued a sharp condemnation of Israel's decision to authorize a series of administrative and enforcement measures in the occupied West Bank, warning that the moves are eroding the prospects for a two-state solution. Speaking through his spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric at a press briefing in New York, Secretary General Antonio Guterres called on Israel to reverse the measures immediately. Dujarric stated that the Secretary General reiterates that all Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem and their associated regime and infrastructure, have no legal validity and are in flagrant violation of international law, including relevant United Nations resolutions. He added that such actions, including Israel's continuing presence in the occupied Palestinian territory, are not only destabilising, but, as recalled by the International Court of Justice, unlawful. The Secretary General called on Israel to reverse these measures and all parties to preserve the only path to lasting peace, which is a negotiated settlement for a two-state solution in line with relevant Security Council resolutions and international law. The language represents some of the strongest UN condemnation of Israeli settlement policy in recent memory, explicitly linking the new measures to both the ICJ's 2024 advisory opinion and the broader framework of Security Council resolutions that have repeatedly declared settlements illegal. The measures that triggered the UN response were approved by Israel's Security Cabinet on Sunday, February 8th. According to reporting from the Times of Israel, Al Jazeera, Al Arabiya, and multiple other outlets, the decisions were championed by Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and Defense Minister Israel Katz. In a joint statement, the two ministers said the decisions are intended to remove decades-old barriers, repeal what they described as discriminatory Jordanian legislation, and enable accelerated development of settlement on the ground. Smotrich explicitly declared that the goal is to continue to bury the idea of a Palestinian state. Katz stated that the government is anchoring settlement as an inseparable part of Israel's government policy. The language from both ministers is notable for its directness. In previous Israeli governments, settlement expansion was often pursued quietly through bureaucratic approvals and incremental steps designed to avoid international backlash. The current coalition has abandoned that approach entirely. Smotrich and Katz are publicly stating their intent to eliminate the possibility of a Palestinian state, treating the international condemnation that follows as irrelevant to their domestic political calculus. Smotrich, who holds the title of finance minister but also exercises authority over the civil administration that governs the West Bank, has been described by analysts as the most powerful settlement advocate to ever hold a cabinet position in Israel. The specific measures approved represent the most significant expansion of Israeli administrative control over the West Bank in decades, according to multiple analysts. At the center of the cabinet's decision is a sweeping overhaul of land laws. The cabinet ordered the repeal of a Jordanian-era regulation that restricted the sale of West Bank land to private Jewish individuals, a rule that has been in place since before Israel's occupation of the territory began in 1967. The cabinet also removed the requirement for special transaction permits for land purchases and renewed a state land acquisition committee that had ceased operating approximately 20 years ago. The practical effect, according to Al Jazeera's correspondent reporting from Birzeit, is that nothing now prevents individual Israeli settlers from owning land and building houses in areas that have historically been under Palestinian control, including city centers like Ramallah. The implications are staggering. Under the previous legal framework, Palestinians in areas A and B could build, own land, and develop their communities within the zones designated for their control under the Oslo Accords. The new measures dissolve those protections. An Israeli settler could theoretically purchase property in the center of a Palestinian city, build on it, and be protected by Israeli law rather than Palestinian Authority. The changes to land ownership and purchasing procedures are, according to analysts cited by multiple outlets, legally difficult to undo, creating facts on the ground that would persist even if a future Israeli government sought to reverse them. This is precisely the concern. According to analysts cited by multiple outlets, the measures could expand settlements in a way that would be legally difficult to reverse. The measures also extend Israeli authority into areas A and B of the occupied West Bank, which under the 1993 Oslo Accords were placed under Palestinian Authority administration. According to reporting, Israeli authorities will now have the ability to demolish Palestinian-owned buildings in these areas, a power they did not previously exercise. The cabinet approved expanded Israeli supervision and enforcement in Palestinian Authority areas on matters including environmental hazards, water offenses, and damage to archaeological sites, framing these as public interest measures rather than as an extension of occupation. The extension of demolition and enforcement authority into areas A and B strikes at the heart of the Oslo framework. Under the 1993 Oslo Accords, the West Bank was divided into 3 zones. Area A under full Palestinian civil and security control, Area B under Palestinian civil control and Israeli security control, and Area C under full Israeli control. The new measures effectively erase these distinctions by asserting Israeli administrative authority across all zones, undermining the foundational agreement that was supposed to serve as a stepping stone toward Palestinian statehood. Additionally, authority over building permits in the city of Hebron, including the Ibrahimi Mosque compound, will be transferred from the Hebron municipality to the Israeli Army's civil administration, which operates under Smotrich's authority. The transfer of building permit authority in Hebron is particularly significant because it effectively renders the 1997 Hebron Agreement meaningless, according to the Palestinian news agency WAFA. Under that agreement, the city was divided into areas of Palestinian and Israeli control. The new measures would consolidate authority under Israeli administration, facilitating expansion of the settlement block in the heart of one of the West Bank's largest Palestinian cities. A similar step will apply to the Bilal bin Rabah Mosque area in Bethlehem, where a new local authority directorate will be established, effectively annexing the area to Israeli administrative control, according to WAFA reporting. The involvement of religious sites in the measures adds a volatile dimension. The Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron, known to Jews as the Cave of the Patriarchs, is sacred to Muslims, Jews, and Christians. It has been a flashpoint for violence for decades, most infamously during the 1994 massacre when an Israeli settler killed 29 Palestinian worshippers. Transferring building permit authority for the site from Palestinian to Israeli administration effectively gives a settlement-aligned Israeli minister control over the physical infrastructure of one of the most contested religious sites in the world. For Palestinians and the broader Muslim world, this is not merely an administrative change, but a provocation with profound religious and cultural implications. Al Jazeera's correspondent, Nida Ibrahim, described the measures as the most dangerous and serious push towards annexation, and the most critical decision since Israel occupied the West Bank in 1967. She noted that the changes allow settlers to own land in areas that have historically been under Palestinian control according to signed agreements, and that owning land or building by settlers in these areas is illegal under both the agreements signed with the Palestine Liberation Organization and international laws that prohibit an occupying power from moving its citizens into occupied territory. The Yesha Council, an umbrella organization representing settlement municipal authorities in the West Bank, praised the moves as among the most significant decisions made by the State of Israel since its return to what it calls Judea and Samaria 58 years ago. The council declared that the government of Israel announced today, in practice, that the land of Israel belongs to the nation of Israel, and described the decisions as entrenching Israeli sovereignty on the ground, de facto. The Settlement Council's own characterization of the measures as de facto sovereignty is notable because it comes from the primary organization representing settlers, not from critics. The Palestinian response has been swift and categorical. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas's office described the decisions as dangerous, illegal, null, and void, stating they constitute the practical implementation of annexation and displacement plans. Abbas called on both the United States and the United Nations Security Council to intervene immediately. Palestinian Vice President Hussein al-Sheikh said the measures represent a total violation of all signed and binding agreements, a serious escalation, and a violation of international law. He emphasized that the unilateral measures aim to eliminate any political prospects, obliterate the two-state solution, and drag the entire region into further tension and instability. Hamas responded by calling on Palestinians in the West Bank to intensify the confrontation with the occupation and its settlers by all available means, and urged Arab and Muslim states to cut ties with Israel. Jordan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs also condemned the decisions. The convergence of condemnation from the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, Jordan, and the United Nations reflects the breadth of opposition to the measures, spanning political factions that rarely agree on anything. The European Union and multiple individual European governments have also criticized the decisions, though the response from Washington has been more muted. Trump's administration has previously stated its opposition to formal annexation of the West Bank, but has not taken concrete steps to prevent the incremental annexation through settlement expansion that analysts describe as annexation by another name. The gap between opposing formal annexation and tolerating de facto annexation is precisely the space in which Smotrich and Katz are operating, and the new measures are designed to exploit it before any potential shift in American policy. When asked by a journalist whether the Secretary General considers the measures to amount to de facto annexation, Dujarric avoided using the specific term but left little ambiguity about the UN's assessment. He said the decisions are not moving us in the right direction and that they are driving us further and further away from a two-state solution and from the ability of the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people to control their own destiny. When the journalist referenced Finance Minister Smotrich's statement that the decision continues to kill the idea of a Palestinian state, Dujarric responded, "Well, it does, right? I mean, I think we would not disagree with that statement, but we would come at it from a very different opinion." The statement is remarkable because it represents a senior UN official explicitly agreeing with an Israeli minister's characterization of the policy's effect while opposing it from a fundamentally different moral and legal position. Smotrich celebrates the death of the Palestinian state as a political achievement. The United Nations mourns it as a violation of international law, but both agree on what the measures are designed to accomplish. When the journalist pressed further, asking what else the Secretary General can do about the situation, Dujarric responded with a statement that captured the limitations of international diplomacy. The Secretary General will continue to advocate for the respect of international law and push for a two-state solution, but he cannot do it alone. He called on others to join the effort. The admission that the UN's most senior official lacks the tools to enforce his own demands reflects a structural weakness in the international system that Israel's far-right coalition has learned to exploit. Condemnation without consequences is, from the perspective of those driving the annexation agenda, an acceptable cost of doing business. The timing of the measures is not accidental. According to reporting from Yedioth Ahronoth, Smotrich and Katz pushed to ratify the decisions before Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's upcoming visit to the United States, where he is scheduled to meet President Trump. Analysts cited by Al Jazeera believe Israel's far-right coalition is racing against time to establish irreversible facts on the ground before October elections for the Israeli Knesset, and amid concerns that Trump might shift his position on annexation. Trump has previously ruled out Israeli annexation of the West Bank, but his administration has not sought to curb the accelerated pace of settlement construction, which reached its highest level since at least 2017, when the United Nations began tracking the data. Israel approved 19 new settlements in December alone, according to UN data. The acceleration of settlement construction under Israel's current far-right governing coalition has been documented extensively. Netanyahu's coalition, which includes some of the most right-wing figures in Israeli political history, has made settlement expansion a central policy priority. Netanyahu himself has described the establishment of any Palestinian state as a security threat, a position that places him in alignment with Smotrich and Katz on the fundamental question even if they sometimes disagree on tactics. The coalition's aggressive approach to settlements has drawn criticism not only from Palestinians and the international community, but from within Israeli society. Polls suggest that a majority of Israeli citizens support a two-state solution in some form, though definitions vary. The coalition's settlement policies are, according to Peace Now, being pursued in total opposition to the will of the nation. The International Court of Justice advisory opinion from 2024 reaffirmed that Israel's occupation of Palestinian territory is illegal and must be brought to an end. The UN Secretary General's statement explicitly referenced the ICJ ruling, stating that Israel's continuing presence in the occupied territory is, as recalled by the International Court of Justice, unlawful. The legal framework is clear. Settlements are illegal under international law. The occupation itself has been declared unlawful by the world's highest court, and the new measures deepen both. But the legal clarity has not translated into political consequences, as no enforcement mechanism exists to compel Israel to reverse the decisions. The ICJ's advisory opinion stated not only that the occupation is illegal, but that third states have an obligation not to recognize the situation as lawful, and not to aid or assist in maintaining it. Several European countries have taken steps in response, including recognizing Palestinian statehood and reviewing trade agreements with Israel. But the United States, which holds veto power at the Security Council, has consistently blocked binding resolutions that would impose consequences on Israel for its settlement policies. Without American support, the international legal framework remains advisory rather than enforceable, a reality that Israel's leadership understands and incorporates into its strategic calculations. More than 500,000 Israeli settlers now live in settlements and outposts across the West Bank, excluding Israeli-annexed East Jerusalem, according to Al Arabiya. Approximately 3 million Palestinians live in the territory. Approximately 700,000 settlers populate the contested land when East Jerusalem is included, according to multiple reports. Smotrich and other advocates from the Israeli right have vowed to double the settler population. The United Nations has reported that over 37,000 Palestinians have been displaced in the past year, and settler violence against Palestinian communities has escalated significantly. The displacement is not random. It follows a pattern in which settlement expansion, military operations, demolitions, and settler attacks combine to make life unsustainable for Palestinian communities, particularly in Area C and in areas adjacent to expanding settlements. The result is a steady demographic shift in which Palestinian populations are compressed into smaller and more fragmented territories, while Israeli settlements grow and connect. The new measures accelerate this process by removing legal barriers that previously slowed it, and by extending Israeli administrative authority into the remaining spaces where Palestinians exercised some degree of self-governance. Israeli peace organizations have also condemned the measures. Peace Now, which advocates a two-state solution, stated that Netanyahu promised to topple Hamas in Gaza, but in practice chose to topple the Palestinian Authority, annul the agreements Israel signed, and force a de facto annexation in total opposition to the will of the nation, Israel's interest, and the clear position of President Trump. The Emek Shaveh organization, focused on protecting archaeological sites, condemned the decisions as ending the government's pretense of concern over heritage sites, arguing the archaeological justification is a cover for settlement expansion. Separately, the UN Secretary-General's spokesperson confirmed that South Africa will withdraw its remaining troops from the UN peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Dujarric expressed deep gratitude for South Africa's decades of commitment and paid tribute to peacekeepers who lost their lives in service. When asked about the decision in the context of peacekeeping missions already operating below capacity and financial constraints, Dujarric said the UN understands that contributing countries face their own security and financial needs, and that it is not for us to question the decision. The withdrawal marks a significant shift in South Africa's foreign policy commitments and raises questions about the future of peacekeeping operations in the DRC at a time when the eastern part of the country remains in crisis. South Africa has been one of the most significant contributors to UN peacekeeping operations in Africa, and its troops have served in some of the most dangerous deployments on the continent. The decision to withdraw comes in a context of financial constraints and competing national security priorities, but it also reflects a broader trend of troop-contributing nations reassessing their commitments to peacekeeping missions that have struggled to achieve their mandates. The UN peacekeeping mission in the DRC, known as MONUSCO, has been operating in the country for over 2 decades and is in the process of a phased drawdown. South Africa's departure will reduce the mission's capacity at a moment when armed groups in eastern Congo, including the M23 movement, continue to pose serious threats to civilian populations. The juxtaposition of these two announcements at the same press briefing captures a broader pattern in international affairs. On the West Bank, the UN issues condemnation without enforcement power, calling on Israel to reverse decisions that the Secretary-General himself acknowledges are driving the situation further from a solution. On peacekeeping in Africa, a major contributor withdraws its forces from a mission that is already understaffed. In both cases, the architecture of international order, built on multilateral cooperation, legal frameworks, and shared commitments, is under visible strain. The Secretary-General can call on Israel to reverse its measures, but as Dujarric acknowledged,